On surface, Subaru looks fine, with commercials showing families in forests and couples conquering mountains. But behind this calm image lies a real concern. Subaru's global market share is eroding faster than anyone dares to admit. Competitors are expanding into emerging markets and electrification, while Subaru remains stuck, steady on paper, yet steadily declining in reality. In the United States, where Subaru once thrived, the brand's share is shrinking. Other Japanese automakers have rebounded aggressively post-pandemic, investing in new factories and technologies, but Subaru is coasting in neutral. And now, financial analysts worry about the gap between Subaru's wholesome public image and its actual performance. Younger buyers want tech-forward, electrified options, and Subaru risks irrelevance. The cracks are visible. As rivals introduce electric vehicles and affordable hybrids, Subaru's core lineup grows stale. Wall Street may not have noticed yet, but when they do, it could be too late. So how did we get here? And why is this happening? Subaru has a production model that feels like it belongs to another era. Most people don't realize this, but for the US market, their largest and most profitable segment, Subaru relies almost entirely on a single manufacturing facility, Subaru of Indiana Automotive. Just one plant, one set of machines, one labor force. That's it. This strategy worked when Subaru was a niche player with conservative growth targets, but now it's a logistical time bomb. One supply chain disruption, one weather event, one labor strike, and Subaru could face a shutdown that derails its entire North American sales operation. In a world where every major automaker is investing in distributed, resilient manufacturing systems, Subaru's bottleneck is more than just a risk. It's a structural liability. The lack of scalability is also killing its momentum. While other automakers are expanding capacity to meet demand for hybrid and electric models, Subaru is struggling to keep up with basic production volumes. Delays, missed delivery windows, and outdated manufacturing methods are piling up. This isn't just a temporary blip, it's a sign of fragility that most consumers never see, but the industry does. With a highly limited global production footprint, Subaru has paid a steep price during times of shortages and crises. During the semiconductor shortage, the company lost more ground than its competitors, not because it made worse decisions, but because it had fewer options. It simply didn't have the global infrastructure to pivot or scale production to other facilities. There's another problem. Subaru's factory in Indiana is operating close to capacity. That means there's no real path forward to increase output unless the company makes a massive investment in new plants, an investment it's yet to commit to. And if Subaru hesitates any longer, it may miss its window entirely. The industry is moving fast, and Subaru's production strategy is built for a much slower race. So when you step into a dealership and notice a lack of vehicles, it's not just because demand is high, it's because Subaru has backed itself into a corner operationally. And unless something changes soon, this bottleneck will continue choking its ability to compete. The pricing strategy that backfired. Subaru was once the ultimate value brand. You chose a Subaru for its dependable build, all-wheel drive capability, and long-term reliability, all at a price that didn't stretch your budget. It was the smart choice, the practical choice. But lately, that positioning has begun to vanish, and it's not because Subaru got more luxurious. It's because they got more expensive. Entry-level pricing on many of Subaru's core models has crept upward, quietly but consistently. The base Forester, once a no-brainer for budget-conscious families, now competes in price with better-equipped rivals. And as buyers start comparing feature sets, Subaru begins to lose its edge. The cars are still solid, but they no longer represent outstanding value. The issue isn't just that Subaru's prices are rising. That's happening across the industry. The issue is that Subaru's increases aren't matched by a proportional rise in features or design innovation. In some cases, they've removed manual transmissions or simplified trim lines, cutting costs while still raising prices. For consumers, that doesn't feel like progress. It feels like a downgrade with a higher price tag. This hits hardest with Subaru's original base, buyers looking for practical, reliable, affordable transportation. Those buyers are now turning to competitors like Hyundai, which offers more tech for less money, or Toyota, which has aggressively introduced hybrids at every price point. Subaru, meanwhile, has failed to introduce a compelling reason why its higher prices are justified. Add to this a rising cost of financing, higher insurance premiums, and economic uncertainty, and suddenly Subaru's entire value proposition begins to crumble. It's not just that the cars cost more, it's that they no longer feel worth it. That perception is deadly, because once a value brand loses the trust of price-sensitive consumers, it's very hard to win it back. Why Subaru dealers are sounding the alarm. Behind the scenes, Subaru dealers are getting nervous, very nervous, while the brand still pushes out its familiar messaging: safe, capable, outdoorsy. The people actually selling the cars are watching foot traffic drop, inventories stagnate, and incentives thin out, and they're not getting the support they need from corporate. One of the biggest complaints? Subaru's communication strategy. Dealers say they're being kept in the dark on production schedules, model updates, and long-term brand plans. When they do get updates, they often come too late to adjust inventory or marketing tactics. That kind of disconnect leads to frustration and, more importantly, missed sales. Then there's the issue of inventory itself. Many dealers are stuck with vehicles that are either overpriced, outdated, or misaligned with customer demand. Subaru hasn't adjusted its product mix to reflect changing consumer behavior, and dealers are the ones left holding the bag. Some are even sitting on hundreds of units that just aren't moving. Compensation structures are also a sore point. Dealers are reporting tighter margins, reduced bonus incentives, and stricter performance requirements. Meanwhile, they're dealing with buyers who are more hesitant, more price-sensitive, and less loyal than ever. It's a perfect storm, and it's not being addressed. What's most alarming is the mood. Subaru used to have one of the most satisfied dealer networks in the industry. Now, many of those same partners are wondering how much longer they can keep playing along. They see what's happening before the public does. They know when the brand's trajectory shifts, and right now they're sounding the alarm. And if corporate isn't listening, the fallout could come fast. Because when the people selling your cars stop believing in your brand, that's when the real collapse begins. The boldest marketing pivot in automotive history. Most people don't realize that Subaru was once on the brink of collapse. In fact, by the late 1990s, the company was struggling to stay afloat in the United States. Its cars were considered reliable, but bland. Its brand identity was vague, overshadowed by the flashier presence of Honda, Toyota, and Ford. But just as Subaru appeared destined to fade into obscurity, it made one of the boldest and most unlikely marketing moves in automotive history. Instead of chasing the mainstream, Subaru leaned into a niche. And not just any niche. A community that, at the time, was almost entirely ignored by corporate America: the queer community. Subaru's early marketing team discovered that a surprisingly large number of their buyers were lesbians. In markets like Northampton, Massachusetts, and Portland, Oregon, the Subaru Outback and Forester had quietly become cult favorites. But rather than treat this as an accidental win, Subaru doubled down. Working with an agency called Mulrian/Nash, they crafted a campaign that was both deeply coded and powerfully affirming. License plates in the ads read Xena LVR in P-Town, references only those in the know would catch. Taglines like "Get out," "Stay out," and "It's not a choice, it's the way we're built" seemed playful on the surface, but they were powerful winks to the community they served. At a time when nearly every major brand either ignored or openly rejected queer audiences, Subaru embraced them, not through rainbow flags, but through subtle recognition and product alignment. The result? A fiercely loyal customer base that saw Subaru not just as a car company, but as a cultural ally. This move didn't just keep Subaru alive. It defined the brand. It transformed Subaru from a struggling nameplate into a symbol of independence, self-reliance, and alternative identity. And most importantly, it showed the power of authenticity before the word became a buzzword. But as we're about to see, even the most authentic identities can harden into cages when loyalty becomes a crutch. Imagine building a brand so beloved, your customers tattoo it on their bodies. That's what Subaru achieved. For decades, Subaru owners have referred to themselves not just as drivers, but as members of a tribe. Their bumper stickers weren't just decorations. They were declarations. Dog is my co-pilot. Love. It's what makes a Subaru a Subaru. The brand's emotional positioning, built on safety, ruggedness, and inclusion, created a sense of belonging that most companies could only dream of. But somewhere along the way, that loyalty turned into complacency. Subaru's leadership, perhaps understandably, began to assume that its customers would always stick around, that if you sold a dependable car and wrapped it in good vibes, the market would forgive anything. Outdated tech? Fine. Slow product rollouts? No problem. A product line that rarely evolved? The loyalists would carry them through. And for a while, that worked. Subaru's market share held steady. Reviews remained warm. Owners still smiled in their commercials. But the landscape was shifting. New buyers were entering the market who didn't remember the 1990s, who didn't care about cultural subtext, who judged cars on torque, touchscreen speed, and monthly payments. And Subaru was caught flat-footed. The issue wasn't just that the cars failed to evolve, it's that the brand relied too heavily on its emotional capital. It assumed that being the lovable underdog would always be enough. But in a market increasingly dominated by speed, software, and sleek branding, sentimentality has a shelf life. What once made Subaru special became the reason it fell behind, and that raises a deeper question. Was Subaru ever really built for the long haul, or did it build its success on a kind of loyalty that no longer exists in the age of choice? Subaru's secret weapon. Here's where it gets really interesting. Subaru's queer marketing is often held up as a success story, and rightly so. It was courageous, ahead of its time, and deeply impactful. But now, decades later, the conversation around it is shifting. As society has evolved, and corporations scramble to appear inclusive, Subaru's once innovative approach is being re-examined through a modern lens, and the verdict is complicated. On the surface, Subaru did something no other automaker dared to do. It recognized a marginalized community, not as a public relations problem, but as a loyal audience. It tailored its message. It offered representation without exploitation, and it trained its dealers on how to respectfully serve LGBTQ+ customers, a rarity at the time. But some voices within the queer community are now asking, was it allyship or just good marketing? Did Subaru really care? Or did it just see a profitable segment? After all, the campaign wasn't born from activism. It was born from data. Analysts noticed a trend, and marketers crafted a response. There's nothing wrong with that, unless you confuse visibility with values. This isn't to diminish Subaru's impact. In fact, many credit the brand with making their first car buying experience feel safe, even affirming. But in today's climate, where rainbow capitalism is under greater scrutiny, the question isn't just who reached out first, it's what they've done since. And here, Subaru's track record is quiet. The brand hasn't maintained the same level of visible engagement it once had. Other companies have entered the space with more public-facing advocacy. Subaru's inclusion legacy, once revolutionary, now feels like a quiet footnote. And that silence can feel like a betrayal to those who once saw the brand as more than just a manufacturer. Which brings us to a harsh reality. In a world where everyone's playing the inclusivity game, being first is no longer enough. They were first, but everyone caught up. Subaru once had the luxury of being the only car brand speaking to certain identities, lifestyles, and values. That gave it power, attention, and loyalty. But today, that uniqueness is gone. Nearly every major automaker now sells lifestyle. Jeep talks about freedom, Ford talks about toughness, Hyundai talks about connectivity and diversity, and they do it with better design, faster tech, and broader reach. Subaru's emotional real estate, once exclusive, is now crowded. The problem isn't that other brands stole Subaru's ideas. It's that Subaru never moved on. It stayed in its niche while the rest of the market evolved. Its tone remained the same, its imagery unchanged. Its message, once fresh and rebellious, now feels recycled. Consumers no longer need to choose between personality and performance, between identity and innovation. They can have both. From brands that have learned how to do what Subaru once pioneered, and often they can have it at a better price, with more features and with fewer compromises. That's the danger of being first in a fast-moving industry. If you don't keep leading, you get passed. And when your competitors start using your playbook better than you do, your history becomes your handicap. Subaru once defined what it meant to speak to the margins, to market with heart, to matter to people who felt unseen. But being early only buys you time. It doesn't buy you permanence. And right now, Subaru is learning that identity, like innovation, only works when you keep evolving. Because in this market, standing still is the same as falling behind. Their technology feels a decade old. You know something's off the moment you sit inside. The cabin is clean, sure. It's got that familiar Subaru practicality. But then you look at the screen, the interface, the lag, the pixelated fonts, and you realize this isn't modern. This isn't even recent. Subaru's tech stack feels like it's been frozen in time. And in a world where digital experience is the experience, That's a death sentence. While competitors like Hyundai and Ford are integrating next-generation interfaces, over-the-air updates, voice assistants, and seamless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, Subaru's infotainment system feels more like a dated appliance, not just behind, forgotten. Its Starlink interface, often criticized for unresponsiveness and clunky menus, is a perfect metaphor for what Subaru has become, stuck between two eras, unable to leap forward. The reality is, car buyers today aren't just looking for horsepower or all-wheel drive anymore. They're looking for a connected experience, something that feels intuitive, intelligent, and evolving. When Tesla sends an overnight update that adds new features or fixes bugs, it's not just cool, it's expected. Subaru? It's still sending customers to the dealership to update their software manually. And this digital gap is more than inconvenient. It's becoming a deal breaker, especially for younger buyers. Tech-savvy drivers, many of whom grew up on smartphones and smart homes, walk into a Subaru and feel like they've stepped back in time. And for a company that once branded itself around progressiveness, that's a contradiction too big to ignore. Subaru's reputation was built on utility and durability. But today, durability means staying relevant in a fast-moving digital age. And that means your car should age like a smartphone, not like a VCR. But Subaru, for all its strengths, is still running on operating systems that feel more 2014 than 2024. The irony? Subaru's customers want to love these vehicles, but love without function has a shelf life. And when that function lags behind by years, even the most loyal buyer begins to question whether the brand is still listening. And if Subaru can't catch up digitally, what does that say about its ability to lead the next automotive revolution? The electric vehicle that wasn't even theirs. It was supposed to be a turning point, Subaru's long-awaited entry into the electric future, a new direction, a new generation, a promise. And then, the Solterra arrived, or should we say, the Toyota with a different badge. The Solterra was launched as Subaru's first full-battery electric vehicle, and on paper, it sounded like progress. Zero emissions, modern design, built-in safety tech. But underneath the surface, it's almost identical to the Toyota BZ4X, built on Toyota's platform, sharing the same powertrain, the same limitations, the same uninspiring performance. Subaru didn't engineer a leap forward, it borrowed one, and in doing so, it revealed something critical. The brand doesn't yet have an original electric strategy, no proprietary architecture, no unique EV philosophy, just a partnership and a hope that it'll be enough. But for buyers stepping into the EV world for the first time, that's not enough. Electric vehicles are not just about being electric. They're about vision, about telling the world where you're headed, not just where the industry is going. Tesla gets that. Hyundai gets that. Even legacy brands like General Motors are beginning to get that. Uncertainty surrounds whether to lead or follow, and the Solterra makes it clear that, for now, Subaru is choosing to follow. This isn't about knocking Toyota. Their EV roadmap is improving. But for Subaru, a brand that once prided itself on doing things differently, slapping a badge on someone else's blueprint feels like the opposite of leadership. More importantly, it sends a signal to the buyer. Subaru is not yet serious about electrification, not on its own terms, not with its own DNA. And in a future where electrification is not optional but expected, this is the moment that separates innovators from passengers. Subaru has to choose which one it wants to be before its brand becomes indistinguishable in a sea of rebranded compromises. Because if your first step into the future isn't really yours, then whose journey are you even on? They quietly killed the fun. For a brand once celebrated by purists, tuners, and rally devotees, Subaru's transformation has been unsettlingly silent. You might assume that means things haven't changed much. In reality, they've changed more dramatically than fans ever expected. But that transformation has happened under a muted corporate narrative. The killing of the manual transmission in the WRX, the absence of a genuine STI successor, and the shift toward continuously variable transmissions have eroded the emotional core that once set Subaru apart. Enthusiasts who cherish the brand's authentic mechanical feel are now left with vehicles that numb the very excitement they were built to inspire. True driving engagement is becoming rare across the entire automotive spectrum, but Subaru's pullback stings more because of what it once represented. In its heyday, Subaru gave everyday drivers a taste of motorsport. It was never just about speed. It was the connection, the sense of control, and the raw feedback through a steering wheel that made even the daily commute feel purposeful. That wasn't a gimmick. It was an identity rooted in rally heritage and mechanical authenticity, two elements that elevated the brand beyond mere transportation. The revised WRX WRX might bear a familiar name, yet removing the manual transmission has altered its soul. Enthusiasts describe it as lacking that distinct bite, that intangible spark that once made every shift a moment of thrill. Comments on forums, lengthy video reviews, and personal ownership accounts converge on a shared lament. Subaru no longer feels like Subaru, and the real tragedy is that this sense of loss extends well beyond gearheads. There was always a broader community that embraced the brand for its adventurous spirit, even if they never took a wrench to their cars or slapped on a performance exhaust. That community grew around Subaru's promise of all-wheel drive mastery, rally-inspired roots, and a certain underdog persona. People defended the brand at gatherings, modified their vehicles, and built entire lifestyles around its ethos. By moving away from the manual transmission, fun-focused trims, and that emotional link to the road, Subaru has effectively distanced itself from those who once wore its badge like an emblem of pride. Of course, Subaru isn't alone in veering away from manual gearboxes or pure performance, but it stands out because it once held an undeniable niche in automotive enthusiasm, a niche that was about accessibility, daily practicality, and the taste of motorsport. In losing that spark, Subaru risks becoming indistinguishable from the pack. When the excitement is toned down and the mechanical engagement is diluted, the vehicles start to blend in with the sea of respectable yet forgettable crossovers. That might appeal to a broader consumer base on paper, but it also risks alienating some of the brand's strongest advocates. If you remove the emotional hook, there's precious little left to differentiate Subaru from a dozen other manufacturers offering comfortable, all-wheel drive crossovers. The brand's legacy was built upon feeling different, upon harnessing a slightly rebellious energy that questioned why everyday cars couldn't also feel dynamic and alive. Without that edge, the journey from special to ordinary is surprisingly short. You lose the vocal enthusiasts, the word-of-mouth evangelists, and the sense of belonging that turned Subaru ownership into a tribe-like phenomenon. Once those elements are gone, it's nearly impossible to recreate them by simply rolling out a new trim or redesign. The emotional bond has to be cultivated consistently over years, and right now, Subaru's cultivation efforts seem to be on hold. Adventure outside, rental car inside. Meanwhile, Subaru's marketing continues to evoke images of rugged escapades, muddy trails, mountain peaks, and that dependable all-wheel drive conquering rain or snow without breaking a sweat. The ads show bicycles strapped to the roof, kayaks on the crossbars, and dogs hanging out the window, ears flapping in the wind. This vision has long been the Subaru calling card, an active lifestyle brand built for people who crave the outdoors. Yet stepping inside a modern Subaru can feel startlingly like entering a car designed for rental fleets rather than frontier exploration. The seats are adequate but lack character. The materials are serviceable but seldom convey a sense of adventure or durability beyond the usual plastic trim. Everything is safe, comfortable, and unremarkably corporate. That discrepancy isn't minor. It's a profound gap between the marketing fantasy and the actual driving experience. Plenty of buyers aren't hardcore off-road enthusiasts, but they do want a vehicle that carries the spirit of exploration. They want something that signals independence, even if they spend most of their driving time commuting in suburban traffic. And Subaru once delivered on that intangible promise, with an ethos of simplicity and genuineness that set it apart from the competition. Now, however, the brand's crossovers risk being overshadowed by others that have blended capability and comfort with more personality. Brands that have learned to make their vehicles stand out in a crowded segment. The Forester and Outback still flaunt roof rails and plastic cladding, reinforcing that outdoor-ready look. But adventure is about more than aesthetic cues. It's about the impression that the car can handle more than just a paved road, that it can handle your desire to go camping off the beaten path without feeling like it might buckle under the pressure. The mechanical confidence Subaru once radiated is slipping away, overshadowed by updates that rarely move the needle in meaningful ways. Competitors have noticed the market's cravings, rolling out models that combine rugged styling with advanced tech and unexpected touches of flair. Buyers seeking that blend are increasingly looking elsewhere, sometimes to automakers that historically lagged behind Subaru. It's one thing to rest on a reputation for off-road prowess, but reputations require upkeep. Without continuous evolution, a brand's identity begins to wilt. That's precisely what's happening. Subaru's dream of wilderness and independence hinges on offering more than just a marketing story. Owners want to feel that sense of limitless possibility when they climb into a Subaru that feels manufactured for generic mass appeal. The fantasy unravels. The result? A disconnect that becomes more obvious with every passing model year. And disconnects in branding and actual user experience are fatal over the long run. Unless Subaru finds a way to inject genuine adventure back into its vehicles through design, capability, and a renewed commitment to driving excitement, the brand risks losing the very crowd it once attracted. It might seem like a minor issue at first glance, but automotive history is littered with manufacturers that lost their edge and never fully regained it. Those who buy into the Subaru dream expect more than reliable transport and decent fuel economy. They expect a spark of authenticity, and that spark is what Subaru is in danger of losing, if it hasn't already. What do you think? Let's know in the comments. Thanks for watching.